That one day, someone will walk into our lives, make the world stop, and complete the puzzle we've been carrying since childhood. We believe love is supposed to feel like magic, like movies, like songs. But here's the truth no one tells us: most romantic dreams don't come true. They shatter, they disappoint. They break us in ways we didn't even know we could break. But that's not where the story ends. Because when the dream breaks, something else begins. And today, I want to talk to you about what really happens when the illusion of love falls apart, and why it might just be the most powerful thing that could ever happen for you, not to you. From the time we are young, the idea of love is fed to us in a polished, filtered, and idealized form. We grow up surrounded by stories where love conquers all, where soulmates are predestined, and where a single romantic relationship can bring ultimate fulfillment. These stories appear in children's books, fairy tales, teenage novels, movies, and even advertisements. The boy meets the girl, they overcome some trivial misunderstanding, and then, without further challenge, they live happily ever after. These narratives don't just entertain, they shape the foundation of how we come to understand love. They create a blueprint in our minds that tells us love should feel effortless, consuming, and destined. That if it's real, it should look and feel a certain way. But while these romantic ideals are beautiful on the surface, they often blind us to emotional reality, creating expectations that real relationships can't live up to. One of the most insidious effects of romantic ideals is the belief in perfection. The notion that there is one perfect person out there waiting for us, a soulmate, implies that love is about finding, not building. It reduces compatibility to chemistry, and it convinces people that if they just wait long enough, or swipe through enough profiles, or hold out for the right moment, they'll stumble upon someone who completes them. This belief shifts the responsibility away from growing together in a relationship and towards searching for someone who already meets all our unspoken criteria. Emotional reality, however, is far less tidy. Real love is not about perfection, it's about acceptance. No one is flawless, and any deep, long-lasting relationship will involve confronting not just the beauty of another person, but also their wounds, insecurities, flaws, and contradictions. Romantic ideals make us feel that the presence of difficulty means something is wrong, when in fact, challenges are part of the fabric of emotional connection. Another way romantic ideals distort reality is by encouraging us to prioritize emotional highs over emotional depth. The early stages of love, infatuation, limerence, the honeymoon phase, are often depicted as the standard of what love should feel like. Intense chemistry, passion, obsession, butterflies in the stomach. But these sensations are temporary by nature. The chemical cocktail of dopamine, oxytocin, and adrenaline eventually settles, and what's left is the opportunity for true intimacy, or disillusionment. If we've been taught to chase only the high, the natural ebb of emotional intensity can feel like a failure. We might think the love is gone, or that we picked the wrong person. In truth, this is just the moment when love shifts from fantasy into reality. Emotional reality asks for stability, trust, shared values, communication, and patience. Qualities that don't always feel like a rush, but which are the actual scaffolding of a strong bond. Romantic ideals also set us up for disappointment by promoting the belief that love will heal us. The idea that someone else can fill our emotional voids, fix our self-esteem, or save us from loneliness is incredibly seductive. It tells us that love is the solution to our inner pain. But this expectation is both unfair and dangerous. No partner can fix wounds that were created before they arrived. Emotional reality teaches that healing is an inside job. A partner can support us, love us, walk beside us, but they cannot be our therapist, our parent, or our savior. When we enter a relationship hoping for someone else to do the inner work for us, we set ourselves up for codependency, disappointment, and emotional burnout. Real love flourishes when two whole people come together, not two halves looking to be completed. Another way in which romantic ideals blind us is by creating unrealistic timelines for love. Stories tend to compress time. People fall in love overnight, overcome major hurdles in a single scene, and make lifelong commitments in what feels like days. This compression trains us to believe that deep connection should happen quickly, that love at first sight is the gold standard, and that, if it takes time, it must not be right. But the reality is that trust takes time. Vulnerability takes time. Learning another person, really understanding them, not just their favorite color or their hobbies, but their fears, their values, their history, takes time. Emotional intimacy is not something that can be rushed, nor should it be. If we're looking for a fast track to forever, we're likely missing the very process that makes love real and durable. The idea of grand gestures is another romantic ideal that distorts our expectations. We're taught to equate love with sweeping declarations, running through airports, proposing in front of a crowd, standing in the rain professing eternal devotion. While these moments make for great cinema, they often overshadow the quieter, more meaningful expressions of love. In reality, love is found in consistency, in listening, in compromise, in being present during mundane moments. It's in showing up for your partner when they're sick, when they're struggling, or when nothing exciting is happening at all. Emotional reality values the small moments, the daily check-ins, the shared silence, the space to be imperfect. If we only value the dramatic, we risk overlooking the stable, and in doing so, we might walk away from relationships that could have been deeply fulfilling simply because they didn't match the movie script in our heads. Romantic ideals also foster the illusion that love is enough. That as long as two people love each other, everything else will work out. This belief minimizes the importance of compatibility, communication skills, emotional regulation, and mutual goals. The truth is that love, while essential, is not a cure-all. People can love each other deeply and still be incompatible. They can share powerful chemistry and still be unable to resolve conflict in a healthy way. They can dream together and still be walking in opposite directions. Emotional reality requires us to look beyond just the feeling of love and assess the practical aspects of a relationship. Do we handle stress similarly? Can we communicate openly? Do we want the same things in 5 years? Love may be the seed, but without the tools to cultivate it, it won't grow. Moreover, romantic ideals often fail to acknowledge the importance of emotional labor. They portray relationships as naturally unfolding, as if love alone will solve differences and heal rifts. But real emotional connection requires ongoing effort, initiating difficult conversations, managing our own triggers, learning how to apologize and forgive, setting boundaries, and being willing to change. These are not the glamorous aspects of love, but they are the necessary ones. Ignoring them in favor of idealized notions leaves people ill-equipped to handle the realities of a long-term relationship. When we expect love to be easy, the first real difficulty can feel like an existential threat, rather than an opportunity for growth. Social media has only intensified the grip of romantic ideals. The curated relationships we see online, couples taking sunset vacations, buying homes, posting anniversary slideshows, create a sense that love should look a certain way. Rarely do we see the arguments, the silent treatments, the therapy sessions, or the compromises made behind the scenes. This creates a distorted lens through which we judge our own relationships. If ours doesn't look as perfect, we assume something must be wrong. Emotional reality, however, is messy. It includes doubt, discomfort, tension, and imperfection. But it also includes resilience, commitment, and growth. By constantly comparing our relationships to a filtered version of others, we risk undermining the real beauty of what we actually have. Romantic ideals also breed fear of being alone, fear of missing out, fear of not being chosen. These fears can push people into relationships they're not ready for, or cause them to stay in relationships that no longer serve them. The fear of letting go of a romantic dream, even when it's no longer aligned with our emotional reality, can be paralyzing. We cling to the image of what we hoped the relationship would be, even as the truth in front of us suggests otherwise. Emotional maturity involves recognizing when a connection is rooted in fantasy rather than reality, and having the courage to choose truth over illusion. This is not easy. It often requires grieving the loss of the dream, before we can embrace the wisdom gained from it. When romantic ideals are internalized, they can also prevent us from seeing and appreciating real love when it appears. A relationship that feels calm, steady, and emotionally secure may be dismissed as boring because it doesn't match the drama we've come to associate with passion. We may overlook emotionally available partners because they don't spark the same chaos we mistook for chemistry. Emotional reality requires a recalibration of what love feels like. It's not always fireworks, sometimes it's a quiet knowing. It's not always butterflies, sometimes it's the peace of not having to question where you stand. Infatuation is one of the most intense and captivating emotional experiences a person can have. It arrives suddenly, often without warning, and wraps us in a whirlwind of desire, fascination, and idealization. When we are infatuated with someone, we don't just like them. We become consumed by them. Every interaction feels charged, every glance carries meaning, and every message, every word, every gesture seems amplified. In those early stages, it can feel like the person we've met is flawless, like they were made just for us. Our minds fill in the blanks with fantasy. We project qualities onto them that may not exist, and we create an image that often doesn't align with the full truth of who they are. That is the power and the danger of infatuation. It feels like love, but it is not yet love. It is the spark, the potential, the beginning of a story, but it is not the story itself. Infatuation thrives on the unknown. It's fueled by mystery, by the parts of a person we haven't discovered yet, and by the excitement of imagining what could be. When we don't know someone well, it's easy to fill in the gaps with our hopes and fantasies. We assume the best, interpret their actions through a generous lens, and minimize or overlook red flags. In that state, our brains are on overdrive, releasing dopamine and oxytocin that make us feel euphoric and attached, even though the foundation of the connection may be shallow. Everything about the person seems exciting: their laugh, their style, their habits, their quirks. But excitement is not the same as intimacy, and obsession is not the same as connection. Infatuation is often more about how someone makes us feel than who they actually are. Over time, as the intensity fades, a new phase begins, the reality phase. The fog lifts, and we start to see the other person as they truly are, not just as we imagine them to be. This is the turning point where many relationships either deepen or dissolve. The shift from infatuation to emotional depth requires more than chemistry. It requires choice, effort, and emotional vulnerability. Emotional depth takes time because it involves seeing the other person clearly, flaws and all, and deciding to stay connected. It involves sharing parts of ourselves that are not polished or idealized. It requires patience, trust, and consistency, qualities that don't produce instant gratification, but yield much more meaningful and lasting rewards. While infatuation can feel effortless, emotional depth is built intentionally. It forms through repeated interactions, honest conversations, mutual support, and conflict resolution. It's not about constantly being impressed by each other, but about being able to sit in discomfort together, to navigate challenges as a team, and to accept one another even when things aren't perfect. Emotional depth involves learning a person's history, understanding their fears, and being willing to face uncomfortable truths. It involves holding space for their emotions, their triggers, and their evolution. These things cannot be fast, tracked, or manufactured. They emerge naturally over time and with care. In the early stages of infatuation, people often confuse emotional highs with compatibility. The intensity can feel like a sign that the relationship is meant to be, but this is misleading. True compatibility reveals itself not in the highs, but in how we handle the lows. Can we communicate when we disagree? Can we respect each other's boundaries? Can we support each other's growth even when it challenges us? These questions often go unasked during infatuation because everything feels good. But eventually, every relationship encounters friction, and how we respond to it determines whether we move toward depth or remain stuck in surface-level attraction. Another difference between infatuation and emotional depth is how we relate to ourselves in the relationship. During infatuation, we often lose sight of ourselves. We want to impress, to be liked, to be chosen. We may hide parts of ourselves that we fear are unlovable, or try to become what we think the other person wants. This kind of self-abandonment can feel thrilling in the moment, but it's unsustainable. Emotional depth, on the other hand, invites us to be authentic. It allows us to be seen fully, not just for our attractive traits but also for our vulnerabilities, insecurities, and imperfections. A deep emotional connection is one where both people feel safe to be their whole selves, without fear of rejection, without performance. Infatuation tends to be ego-driven. It often centers on how the other person makes us feel, desirable, valued, excited. There's a sense of validation that comes from their attention and affection. But once the novelty fades, we may find that we're not as emotionally connected as we thought. Emotional depth, in contrast, isn't about what we can get from someone, but what we can build with them. It's about mutual respect, empathy, and a willingness to grow together. It's not as glamorous as infatuation, but it's more nourishing. It feeds our emotional needs rather than our ego. Time is an essential factor in the transition from infatuation to emotional depth. There is no shortcut. You cannot truly know someone after a few weeks or even a few months. You can know how they make you feel, how they behave under ideal circumstances, and what they choose to show you, but true knowledge of someone, the kind that builds trust and intimacy, comes from shared experiences over time. Watching how someone reacts to stress, how they treat others, how they navigate disappointment or conflict, these are the moments that reveal character and compatibility. Emotional depth is built not in moments of bliss, but in the quieter, more challenging moments that test the strength of the bond. The process of developing emotional depth often requires unlearning the myths we've been taught about love. Many people believe that if the excitement fades, it means the relationship is dying. This belief can cause them to abandon potentially strong relationships simply because the infatuation has worn off. But the fading of infatuation is not a failure. It's a necessary shift. It's the point where real love can begin. If we expect a relationship to feel like a perpetual high, we set ourselves up for disappointment. The truth is that emotional depth often feels quieter, more grounded, more stable. It may not always be thrilling, but it is deeply fulfilling. A relationship rooted in emotional depth has space for both people to grow individually and together. There's less pressure to perform, and more space to be honest. This kind of connection allows for emotional nuance, for people to have bad days, to be unsure, to change. It values honesty over perfection and substance over appearance. Emotional depth also allows for deeper intimacy, not just physical, but intellectual, spiritual, and emotional. It fosters a sense of being truly known and accepted, which is far more powerful than being admired or desired. Infatuation, while intoxicating, often discourages real vulnerability. There's a fear that if we reveal too much of ourselves, we'll scare the other person away or ruin the fantasy, so we stay in performance mode, sharing only what we think is acceptable. Emotional depth challenges this. It asks us to be real, even when it's uncomfortable. It's the difference between saying what sounds good and saying what's true, between being liked and being loved, between being impressive and being understood. Many relationships fail, not because the people involved weren't compatible, but because they mistook the end of infatuation for the end of love. When the fireworks die down, they believe something is wrong, not realizing that they are standing at the doorway of something deeper. But entering that deeper space requires courage. It means embracing the mundane, dealing with conflict directly, and continuing to choose each other, even when the feelings aren't as intense. Emotional depth asks us to love someone even when they're not easy to love, and to let them love us in our most unlovable moments. It's also important to note that emotional depth requires emotional maturity. Not everyone is ready or willing to go there. Some people remain addicted to the chase, to the thrill of infatuation, avoiding the discomfort of depth. They may move from person to person, relationship to relationship, always seeking that initial spark and never staying long enough to see what it could become. Others may crave depth but fear it. Fear being seen, fear being hurt, fear being vulnerable. Building emotional depth requires working through those fears, often slowly and imperfectly. It requires being open to discomfort, uncertainty, and emotional risk. A relationship built on emotional depth is far more resilient than one built on infatuation. It can weather storms because it's not based on illusion. It's grounded in reality, two people with real flaws and real feelings choosing each other day after day. It's the kind of connection that doesn't dissolve when things get hard, because it was never dependent on things being easy in the first place. Emotional depth creates a partnership where both people are invested not just in each other's pleasure, but in each other's well-being and growth.